as officers were closing in on him. Adams was from Rock Hill and played in the NFL for 6 years. During an autopsy, doctors found that Adams showed signs of severe brain damage caused by CTE. So I want to lay out sort of the update since this 5 years. So Adams' father, Alonzo, filed a wrongful death lawsuit in Orangeburg County, South Carolina. Now, the Adams family sued the NFL properties, South Carolina State University, where Adams played college football. The suit claims and it states that head trauma led to CTE. The NFL and South Carolina State have denied these claims. A more recent update, now back in January, according to the Rock Hill Herald, a South Carolina judge denied the NFL's request to dismiss a brain injury lawsuit, this brain injury lawsuit. So again, a lot to unpack here, but we want to focus in on CTE. This is a conversation we've continued to have here on Live Impact News. And coming back to the show, Dr. Kelli is back here. How are you doing, Dr. Kelli? Thank you for joining us.
I am great. Thank you for having me back. How are you?
I'm doing well. 5 years since this case. We were just talking about it before. We can't believe it's been 5 years since everything transpired there in Rock Hill. For those who don't know, and we've had this conversation before, you've been on to talk about brain injuries. We're going to talk about Brain Talk Day in a little bit. For those who don't know, what is CTE?
CTE stands for chronic traumatic encephalopathy, and it is a neurodegenerative brain disorder or disease, and it happens due to repeated head injuries. So the individual that we're talking about, he did sustain concussions. There is a difference between sustaining a concussion and reporting it, and sustaining a concussion and not reporting it. So from the information that I've learned in taking a peek into this case, the individual had 2 or 3 reported concussions, and to my understanding, he sustained concussions within 2 to 3 weeks of each other while he was playing, and those repetitive head injuries really add up, and that starts the process for CTE. But the injuries are sustained, and then the signs and symptoms can show up later, delayed. So this individual was retired from the NFL and started showing signs later, but they are a buildup of multiple injuries that take place over time. So you don't bonk your head and then it's like, oh, there's CTE.
Right.
These are injuries that have been sustained likely from the time that he started playing. So that's why it's important to raise the awareness for young people so they can make decisions that are best for themselves and their brains.
And we're not just talking about, I remember last time you were here, we were talking about, I think we were talking about Brain Talk Day, we were talking about head injuries, and it's not just football.
Correct.
Right? I mean, I didn't even think about it, but law enforcement, hockey, all these other professions in sports, although CTE is synonymous with, it seems like, football, and that's kind of how everything sort of kicked off. Really.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's where I don't want to say claim to fame, but that's where the notoriety of CTE is coming in, is with athletes, with sports. And so there are other populations that are at risk that people may not consider, like domestic violence survivors. They can sustain repetitive head injuries, and so that can lead to CTE. You mentioned first responders. So when I was here last time, we talked about a police officer who did play football, and he was in the military. He was a police officer, and he did die by suicide and was diagnosed as the first law enforcement officer, to our knowledge, to be diagnosed with CTE. CTE can only be diagnosed after death. And so if you do show signs, then now there is a diagnosis of suspected CTE. But yes, it can happen in other populations like first responders, military personnel as well, domestic violence survivors, and even child abuse survivors can be diagnosed with suspected CTE.
How has the conversation evolved around CTE? Because I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, like mid to late 2000s is when that term started to be thrown out there. Even like CTE, even like, what is that? And then obviously kind of, the NFL and then obviously the movie Will Smith came out years later. But how has the conversation evolved?
Slowly.
Yeah.
It is an uncomfortable
Okay.
conversation. Yes, it's an uncomfortable conversation, but with situations like this, we're at the 5-year anniversary of this very unfortunate situation, and now that these things are happening, it's putting more of a highlight onto what is happening. So even when I was going back and looking at coverage that you all provided, and the documentaries that have come out that are brief and are watchable on YouTube, the conversation that's being had around it has shifted. So when this first started, it was this big scary athlete, and that's a lot of times the narrative that we find, because the brain injuries that we're talking about are invisible. And so these individuals can look fine, and that's the real challenge. You look fine, and when you look fine, the societal expectation is for you to act fine. And the brain injuries that are resulting in people killing and taking their own lives, it's causing the conversation to be taken more seriously, and for us to have more of these very important conversations.
Now that we know more about CTE, I know you said the conversation and sort of how we discuss it is slowly evolving. What do you tell caregivers? What do you tell family members? What do you tell friends about those folks who may be dealing with those early symptoms? Again, you can't, obviously you said you're not diagnosed until you pass away, but we know the symptoms, we know the signs. What do you tell caregivers? How do you handle that? How do you put wrap your arms around that?
Raising awareness. So, I come here and I talk with you, and we talk to your wonderful viewers and listeners. So we know, but we have to continue to have these conversations so that we can let caregivers know. From my perspective, it's really the raising the awareness and then educating people on what are the signs and symptoms, what should you be looking for. I call them CTE episodes because there's a shift in how they're functioning, because the thing that you are noticing with a lot of these reports are loved ones will say, this is not them, this is not how they act, they're not behaving like themselves, and that is very true, they are not. So a CTE episode or a CTE trance takes place, and then things like what we are talking about now take place, and if the individual survives, there are circumstances where the individual has no idea that they have done these things. So there's no recollection of it. So it's tough. It's a tough conversation. Yes, we know about it, but so many more conversations need to be had. I'm doing my best to raise the awareness through platforms like Brain Talk Foundation. I want to get into the schools. I want to bring Brain Talk Day to youth so that they can be more knowledgeable about it. There are football coaches who are very much in support of Brain Talk Foundation, and so they have been kind enough to invite me so I can speak to their players. But learning more, knowing more, that's how you can do better and make the best decision for yourself.
I was about to say, are they open to it? I know you see in sports now, especially, and I bring back football, but the Guardian cap, right? That's a thing, which 10 years ago, 5 years ago, you wouldn't have thought, okay, we're not introducing that. That's not a part of football. But people don't even blink twice about it. They don't even think about it really. But folks, coaches, parents, players are open to the conversation?
Some.
Okay.
Some are. Like I said earlier, this is a very difficult conversation. Football is such a huge part of our culture and an important part of our culture. And so navigating this space is very delicate. Not everybody wants to hear what I have to say. Not everybody wants to invite me to come and speak, because the results of that, you know better, and then the goal is for you to do better, but the ball is in their court, no pun intended, for them to make the best decision for themselves, for their teams. But I have been very encouraged to speak to those coaches who want to put their players first versus a championship or even their own employment sometimes. But the decisions that they make on listening to a player's reports of what they're experiencing with symptoms, the concussion protocols, the professionals that they have on the sidelines and that are working with them, I am encouraged that there are individuals who are very much in support of that. The tough part is getting multiple individuals who are on board with that and then getting them to invite me into those spaces so that I can raise the awareness. My goal is not to tell players don't play. My goal is to give them the information that I believe they have the right to know, and that's how we can alleviate the kinds of lawsuits I think that are coming for large organizations, because the the pattern that I'm seeing is they weren't aware.
Yeah.
So they're saying the universities or the leagues are not providing adequate information so these players can make the best decision.
So, like you said, you've done a lot, and you continue to do a lot to spread awareness. Let's start with this, the book.
Yes.
You're coming out with a book. I didn't know that until you got here. I'm excited for you.
Thank
Can you
you.
talk about what the book is about and I guess what you hope folks to take away from the book once it finally comes out?
Yes. Well, this book is a long journey. I'm very glad that we have a finished product. The book is called The 25,000 Mark. It's not just a concussion. The 25,000 Mark, it is an homage to Dr. Bennett Amalu. He is the neuropathologist who discovered CTE in the retired Steelers player Mike Webster. And that number signifies that it is a symbolic number. And when Dr. Amalu examined Mike Webster's brain, he said that the condition of his brain was identical to someone who would have suffered or sustained or been a part of 25,000 car crashes. So the title of the book is talking about that mark, that number of hits that can be sustained along somebody's career in playing. So the book is about a young man named Brett and his journey from being a high school football star to going to the collegiate level, and it talks, through what he experiences with the different symptoms of concussion and how that impacts his social life, his life with his family, his academics, and just the journey of that. But I tell it from the perspective of 3 different people, so multiple people can relate to this book. So I tell it from the perspective of Brett. There's also the perspective of his parents, because parents can see what's happening to their kids. They may know something's wrong, but they don't have the awareness to know the signs. The dad in the book, he is a former football player, so he's very much like, he can handle it, don't worry about it. And the mom is like, I know my kid, something's not right. And then I also tell it from the perspective of a coach. So his coach, of course, can see that, he's off by just a second, and the internal dialogue of, I've heard of some things that aren't really good, but should I pull them? Do I pull them? What do I do? And so that internal conflict with coaches that they experience. And then it goes through his collegiate career and him graduating and the decisions that he make. I won't spoil what happens in the end, but it is something that is done in a storytelling fashion, so it's more digestible, and it's a pretty brief read, and the chapters are brief, so I know that attention span is not the greatest with all the technology that we have today, so I made it as readable as possible. It's very short. It's about 117 pages, and maybe 100 when you don't have like the title page and all of that, but it's a quick read, and it really gives insight into what is happening in the brains of these players, what could be happening internally with their families as well as the coaches, and giving people just insight into what this actually looks like and can feel like.
What was the toughest part about writing this book? Like actually telling this story?
The relationships, intentionally documenting or describing the breakdown of relationships. Brett has a very close relationship with his parents, and through the CTE episodes, there are some moments where he gets violent and gets in his own mother's face, and that requires the dad to step in. But there's a moment where the dad is looking into Brett's eyes, and he's like, this is not some crazed stranger, this is my son. And so the dad has to have a moment of softening as well. And I think the tough part of having conflict with the parents, because getting your athlete to play at a really great university and on scholarship is a goal, it's a dream, but then what is the cost? And so having to talk about that conflict with parents was definitely a challenge as well.
Oh man, wow. I'm like captivated. I'm like, now I need to get an advanced copy.
Yes.
I know you're gonna be back next week, because coming up, Brain Talk Day. But talk to us again, because it ties together. Talk to us about Brain Talk Day. You got on me before about Brain Talk. We'll save that, but let's talk about Brain Talk Day.
You'll be there this year, right?
Yes.
Okay, so Brain Talk Day is my community offering. It's through my nonprofit, Brain Talk Foundation. Our goal is to raise awareness about concussions, traumatic brain injury, and CTE in athletes and other at-risk populations. This year's theme is It's Not Just Sports, and that is to highlight the individuals that are also impacted by concussion, and that can be be impacted by CTE. So we have a great lineup of speakers. I'm very excited for those that are going to be coming. We have a judge who actually had to retire from the bench because of the level of severity of her concussion.
Wow.
I actually worked with her myself, and it took a substantial amount of time and just the cognitive wherewithal that is required for her job after, rehabbing and exercises, and, trying to rehab while she's also still living her life. She's a mother, she's an avid tennis player. She, gives back to the community. And so all of those different aspects of her life had to be put on hold to a certain extent. This is a mother. She can't stop raising her children. And so finding that balance was absolutely a challenge, but I'm very happy that she's going to be at Brain Talk Day to share her story. We also have a beauty queen who is from Idaho, and she actually is going to Zoom in. She has sent in her presentation, and she is a 23-year Air Force veteran, and she is living with suspected CTE and early onset dementia. And you hear Air Force and you think, what kind of war was she in, or what kind of service was she required to do? Hers came from child abuse.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So it had nothing to do with her military career, but because she is a veteran, she has excellent care. She has had the best care, and she talks about that, how fortunate she is. But, again, you wouldn't think that this beautiful pageant queen is living with early onset dementia and suspected CTE from the cause that she is. We also have an individual who's going to be talking about psychedelics. It's a very risque topic, but it is something that is new and up and coming in the space of healing when it comes to the brain. And so creating those new neural pathways and learning what things that are growing from the earth can do. There's, it's risque, it's a taboo topic, but there are a lot of large institutions like Johns Hopkins that are getting into this work to see what can be done to help with the healing of the brain for these severe cases like CTE. And then we'll have a wonderful individual from a company called True Brain. It's a very innovative company, and they have the technology to actually place LEDs on your scalp and see what's happening in your brain, but it's not like a static image like an X-ray.
Yeah.
It's like a movie. And like the example that they provide is like if you're grinding your teeth, it will light up on the screen and show like a movie what part of the brain is being impacted by you completing that action. So there are a lot of wonderful sessions that are taking place. I like to have a moving component with Brain Talk Day, so we're also going to have a Pilates instructor there who is able to educate on the benefits of movement and intentional movement with Pilates and how that can be healing and helpful for the brain. We'll have vendors and all the things. So I hope everybody comes out. This is a free event. It's the last year that it will be free, so I hope people come out. I hope people come out. But we always have a wonderful time, and it impacts and touches the community in a way that continues to motivate me to do this year after year.